This is Alex Habersham again with your series on Blackenomics. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the role that churches play, and the role that churches now play, and the role that churches can play a greater role in the development and the advancement of our community from a Blackenomic and other perspectives. For example, I'm standing here at Stewart Chapel African Methodist Episcopal Church, which really was built in 1869, but it burned down. And then they rebuilt it in 1872, and of course, slaves did it. So now, for this church, Mary, I'll say the name right, Mary McCart Bethune spoke here, Benjamin E. Mays spoke here, and of course, in 1957, even Dr. King himself spoke here. You know, he said, "There's no north." This was a speech, y'all. No north, no south, no east, no west. The only direction in which we need to go in is love. So we're going to continue emphasizing the role that churches play in our community by going to another church. Well, I'm back talking about the churches, and I'm happy to be standing here on the steps of First Baptist Church. You know, now this church has an interesting history because we have to call this the Black First Baptist, because the majority of First Baptist is up the street. And what used to happen is that black people used to come to the majority of First Baptist, which was predominantly white at the time, and they used to have to sit up in the balcony. But so many black folks started coming to the white First Baptist until they decided in 1835. I found that on the walls, y'all. This is so interesting and so neat that they got this history embedded in the granite on the steps. So they founded this church in 1835. But what's even, oh yeah, incidentally, the first African American to run for mayor of Macon, Georgia, was the pastor of this great church in the person of Reverend Julius Caesar Hope, also known as Reverend J.C. Hope. Now, but what's interesting about the churches, let's think about it. Oftentimes it's forgotten that, you know, the churches is where they had put together boycotts and had mass meetings and had other kinds of meetings to stimulate and assemble the community for civil rights, to fight for their rights, to preach about their rights, to learn about their rights. So we cannot overlook and do not need to take lightly the role that the church played and continue to play as it relates to the civil rights movement. But now what's interesting, a lot of people don't think about it, but if you look at the history of civil rights, Reverend Ralph David Abernathy, Reverend Joseph Lowry, Reverend Martin Luther King, and the mere fact that those leaders were preachers really tells you something. And maybe you hadn't thought about it, but they were the independent force in our community because they didn't have jobs, you know, within the community, so they couldn't be fired. And most of the time they were educated and they were influential. So we do not need to forget the role that churches and preachers have played in the development of our community. I'm leaning on this pole just to kind of illustrate that the community leaned on churches back during the early times when we were striving for our freedom. And back to the conversation about churches. This is Washington Avenue Presbyterian Church, which is believed to be the oldest Presbyterian church in Black Presbyterian church in Georgia. You know, they thought about it and it kind of formed in 1838, but they really built this church in 1869. Now, the observation that I would like to make, if in fact, watch me, that, you know, people who were enslaved, you know, dealing with slavery, found the wherewithal to try to work on their freedom and to help each other and to build a community. Why in the world can't we do that now? The churches played a role, the ministers played a role, the parishioners played a role, and I think that there's a strong indication now, with all these churches having played a role, you know, back in the day, there's a strong indication and a strong mandate that we need to jail these churches and these individuals and these pastors together to work on, you thought I wasn't going to say it, didn't you? Blackenomics, uplifting the African American community through the power of African American consumerism. Okay, I'm back. And you might think that I got in the car to go to all these churches, but I didn't. They were within 3 minutes of walking distance of each other, all downtown near Cotton Avenue, which was then called, and is still now sometimes called, what used to be Macon Black Wall Street. And this is Holy Temple, CME Church. Now, let me tell you what's interesting, you know, within this circle of where I've been walking. We've had an AME church, a CME church, a Baptist church, and a Presbyterian church. So what that means that all denominations realize the importance of impacting the community and doing some good for their parishioners. So I don't think anyone would argue with me about the role that churches played in our freedom, in our development, in our livelihood, and the role that pastors played in our freedom in all of those other areas. So my point is, before I tell you don't just stand there, do something, but my point is that if in fact they did it then with under dire circumstances, I think there are some indications that we need to do it now. as it relates to bringing together the churches, the parishioners, the ministers to try to uplift the community through Blackenomics. So if you're a part of it, if you know somebody, just kind of emphasize that to them. Say, hey, the church has played a significant role in our development over 100 years ago, 150 maybe, and we can do the same thing. And you know what else you need to tell them? Don't just stand there, do something. See you next time.